Welcome back to the Art and Skill of Coaching, where I teach you how to coach. So today we're going to be talking about 7 powerful coaching questions to help your clients get to the root of their patterns, especially when they're stuck, particularly stuck in cycles of avoidance, control, or self-sabotage. And these are the types of questions that are going to move a session from surface level strategy into deep transformation. These questions are going to help clients understand the underlying why. Why do they do what they do, and how to create change that actually lasts. And the reason I'm giving you these specifically curated questions is because there's nothing wrong with the basics. I use the basics too, such as what is your desired result and why, or what have you tried in the past, what's worked, what hasn't, or what would this result be worth to you, or how does that make you feel? These are all important questions to ask, but one, they should have already been answered on the consultation, if not the first call, and 2, they keep the coaching behaviorally focused. So what do you ask on session 10 or 11, or what do you ask to take the session deeper? That is what we're going to be covering today. So question number 1 is, when did you first learn that that's how to handle things? Or to take this question a step further, when did you first learn that that was the safest way to handle things? When you as the coach start to notice a client is repeating something, or subconsciously or unintentionally depending on a particular behavior or thought process that isn't working for them, this is a very helpful question to pull out of the coaching toolbox, because this question traces behavior back to learning, not character. And if it's something we learned, it's also something technically we can unlearn. And when clients do things that they know aren't good for them, like get defensive or overwork, or things that have negative consequences like people pleasing or shutting down emotionally, it's not random, and it's not that they don't have control over those things. Underlying that, a lot of times for a lot of clients, is that it's usually some type of learned safety mechanism, because at some point, whatever they are currently doing was the smartest strategy available to them at the time. And so asking this question really helps them see their behavior as adaptive, and it might be maladaptive now, but at one point it was helpful, but now it's not worth the negative side effects or consequences. And once they can recognize that, they can just decide to update the strategy, which will actually get them closer to their desired result and create real sustainable safety, instead of blindly repeating these outdated, unevaluated patterns, or chronically judging themselves for it and feeling disempowered like they can't change it. And this takes me to a similar question that I love to use. So question number 2 is, what is the function in the dysfunction? Every single pattern serves a purpose, even the ones that end up creating pain or negative consequences. And the reason we do things that we know aren't good for us is because sometimes we will violate our values to get our needs met. And this happens subconsciously. So maybe that client overworking chronically and burning themselves out actually keeps them from feeling unworthy. Maybe them seeking control helps them avoid the uncertainty that makes them feel unsafe. Maybe avoidance in their relationships or sparking conflict in their relationships keeps them from feeling closeness and intimacy, which feels so unsafe to them. But again, when you ask about the function in the dysfunction, you shift from fixing to understanding without judgment. And that understanding is what allows a pattern to start to lose its power and give you and the client space to coach on healthier ways to get those needs met without all the negative consequences. Now, speaking of patterns, here's another powerful coaching question. Number 3 is, where else do you see this pattern showing up in your life? And the reason this is such a great question is because patterns are rarely isolated. You've probably heard the saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything, and there is some truth to that. So for example, a client who overfunctions at work is probably overfunctioning at home as well, if not in their friendships and in their self-care and in every other area of their life. And so what this question does is it widens awareness. It really helps a client step back and see what they thought was a situational problem might actually be a systematic one, and it encourages them to stop blaming that particular person or environment or situation or circumstance and look deeper at the common denominator, which is them. And once they can see this through line, they can start to address the root issue, the root mechanism, instead of treating the symptoms and never actually achieving any sustainable result, which is what is going to take your coaching from good to great. Now, I have seen this a lot, and you probably have too, but what happens when that habit is really hard to die? The client just can't get rid of it. Then you can ask coaching question number 4. which is what part of you benefits from keeping this pattern in place. Because resistance isn't the enemy, it's just a messenger. It's valuable information, and it's a sign to you as a coach to dig a little bit deeper. Because like we talked about before, every dysfunctional behavior has some type of payoff, okay? Maybe it's control or approval or safety or predictability or belonging, something deeper that the client is not recognizing immediately, but it's absolutely playing a role. And so what this question does is it helps the client identify any secondary gains they're getting from the dysfunctional behavior or pattern or habit, aka really identifying what's the hidden benefit of staying the same, which is crazy to think about, right? Because if they're hiring a coach, they want to change, and that might be true, and simultaneously there might be some benefit to staying the same. That not only shows up in relationships, but it shows up internally for us as well. So this is a really hard example, but when I was thinking about an example that might really bring this point home, it actually reminded me of a client I was working with probably a decade ago when I was a therapist. Now, this client was a sexual assault survivor, but I was working with them almost a decade later, and I wasn't even working with them specifically on the trauma. We were working on a completely different issue, which was weight management. And what's interesting is after a few months, we started to notice that we really weren't making a lot of progress on her weight management, even after we were getting other hands on deck, like nutritionalists and personal trainers and group therapy. And it's when I started to actually dig a little bit deeper and bring questions like this into the session that we made some headway. And when I asked a variation of this question, what part of you benefits from keeping this pattern of binge eating and weight on? That was a really risky question, but what came through was really valuable, and it opened up the therapy for a whole nother level. And it was that she was so afraid of losing the weight because she didn't want attention from men. Pretty profound, right? And she had made this connection in her brain that when she was smaller, she would get attention from men, which was dangerous. And so sometimes we're not even aware of those underlying thoughts that are wreaking havoc on our behavior until we're encouraged to pause and really explore the potential benefits of any resistant pattern or habit that's not dying easily. And that's often where the real work begins. Okay, so I briefly mentioned this before, but I think it's a valuable question to ask on its own. And it's question number 5. What is the need being met, but value that's being violated? This is one of my favorite questions for clients who are burned out or conflicted. So maybe their need for safety is being met, but their value of freedom is being violated. This is something I personally experienced, and it's the reason it took me so many years to actually launch my business. I had wanted to be a coach ever since I was 18 years old and hired my first life coach. But it actually took me 7 years to go full-time into my coaching because I was so stuck on needing to feel safe, which I equated to certainty and predictability and consistency, which my salaried position got me. I went to college, I checked all the boxes, I used my degrees, I got a job, and even though I was living paycheck to paycheck, that felt safer than venturing out into entrepreneurship with so many unknowns and so much unpredictability. But I never lost sight of it, and every single day I felt that internal whisper get louder and louder because the value of freedom was just as important to me. So that's an example of when I coached myself through this very exact question, what came up for me. Let me give you another example. Let's say your client's need for connections being met, but their value of intimacy is being compromised. So they're in a relationship that meets the need of companionship, but they actually don't feel seen, heard, or known or supported in that relationship. And so they're always questioning if they should leave or if something else is better out there for them. So as you can see, this question, very simple, but really profound, because what it helps do is surface any internal conflict that's keeping a client stuck or create any internal discrepancy between where they are and where they want to be and how they might be contributing to that and why. And again, this awareness can be really uncomfortable, but that discomfort is what real motivation is based off. So don't be afraid to explore this with your clients. Just make sure that there's not any criticism or judgment embedded in the question. Okay, I got 2 more questions for you today. So if these are helpful, definitely let me know in the comments so I can keep these types of episodes coming for you. So question number 6 is, what is the story you're telling yourself about the situation? And a follow-up question would be, how true is it? Not everything you think is true. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and approximately 40 to 50,000 of them are repetitive negative thoughts, okay? So I know this sounds basic, but I can't tell you how many times I have to remind clients and even myself that just because I think it, it's not true. And this question is a really powerful way to challenge any cognitive distortions that are going on without any confrontation. It keeps us in in a sense of curiosity and evaluation. And so how you can utilize this is when clients are feeling stuck, it's usually not necessarily just because of the situation, it's because of the story they're telling themselves about it. Another way to say this is it's not necessarily the event itself, but the meaning they're assigning to it. So this question actually invites the client into something that we call metacognition, which is becoming aware of not just the circumstances and the details of the situation, but the story running in the background around the situation. And the follow-up of how true this is creates just enough space for perspective and evaluation that's often needed to help start to loosen the grip that story or that narrative has on the client and opens up any alternative thoughts or plans to actually move the client forward in a way that's not only truer, but healthier and more helpful. And speaking of clients feeling stuck, here's my last deep coaching question for you today. And it is, if you fully trusted yourself here, what decision would you make? When clients are feeling indecisive or stuck in external validation loops, like waiting for permission, waiting for evidence, waiting for someone to say, yeah, that's a good idea, go do it, they're gonna unfortunately be waiting for a really long time. And what this question helps them do is it grounds them in self-trust, which let me define for a second. Self-trust is when you have a belief in your own ability, in your own judgment and capacity to handle everything, including life's challenges. And it involves having a fundamental reliance on your inner wisdom and staying true to your values and being kind and compassionate towards yourself and having confidence that you'll be able to navigate whatever challenges present themselves to you and that you can make decisions in alignment with your authentic self and pivot if need be. I know this sounds easy. It's really hard to do in practice, but what this question does is it encourages that self-trust instead of just giving into the noise of fear. And it's going to return your client back to their internal authority, aka their personal power. Because what I've noticed over the last decade of coaching is that a lot of times clients low-key already know the answer. They just don't trust themselves enough to actually act on it. I'm going to say that again. A lot of times you and or your clients already know the answer or have an idea of it, but they're afraid to acknowledge it because they don't trust themselves to act on it yet. But once you explore this with clients and build up that self-trust, you can take that awareness and turn it into action and create really beautiful results. Now, you don't need to ask questions like this as you coach. You can just focus on goal setting and accountability and still be helpful. But great coaching is going to take the work deeper, and these 7 questions are going to create insight and movement towards sustainable results. Why? Because as you can see, these help clients see their patterns, but not only see their patterns, but see them as learned. Not that it's a character deficit or that they're broken or that they don't have control. And seeing their habits as learned behavior is really empowering because they can always unlearn them and learn new ones. It also helps clients understand the function in their dysfunction and find healthier ways to get those underlying needs met. And like I just mentioned, it helps clients build enough trust in themselves to take that awareness and choose something new. And even though these questions might not elicit direct, simple answers on the spot at first, they are more valuable in the long term because the best coaching questions help return them to their own inner wisdom. And if you want to learn how to ask questions like this and use the psychology behind them to create real change, make sure you join the waitlist for the Art and Skill of Coaching. This is my advanced coach training program where we dive into the neuroscience, emotion regulation, and practical, tangible coaching tools that make these types of sessions and breakthroughs for clients possible. And if you love these 7 questions, you would love Coach Question of the Week. This is a free coaching question and explanation sent into your inbox every single Monday morning. I'll throw the link to both of those in the show notes. And as always, I hope you found today's episode helpful. If so, please share this podcast on your socials, leave us a review, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another training to help you master the art and skill of coaching.